Friday, November 15th, 2013, and we just had Uncle Pete in webinar number 91. So this is webinar number 92 with Bob Roos, and he was kind of responding to this long chat on Skype, and so this is what he's going to present, something about external files.
Yeah.
There you go. Welcome back, man. I missed your series when you went one after the other.
Yeah.
Well,
He needs
I
to
haven't
pick
been
up
doing
slack.
I haven't been doing a lot of new stuff, and so it wasn't terribly interesting. But the other day, I had a requirement to reformat some data from one thing into a standard format and then make it available to an external system. And so that grew then from, gee, you know, if you can do one, can you do this one and this one and this one? And so I said, well, let me think about how to do this generically rather than specifically for this one vendor. These are invoices coming in that need to be processed. And so I started thinking about it, and I thought, oh, you know, tab delimited files are kind of a pain to look at because, you know, you've got the first tab and the first field and the second field and the third field, and how do you keep it all straight? I'd used subscripts 1, 2, 3, 4 in the past, and I said, you know, I think I'm going to name them. And so it was like, all right, if I name them, then I can use them symbolically. And so I did that, and I'll show you how I achieved this arrangement here a little bit later, but let's just talk about the overall process. So having named each column, if you will, in the tab delimited file, this is one file. This is actually the output file. This is the header for the input file and the detail lines for the input file. And then it turns out as I shift to other people, they're going to have different names for the similar fields and things. So that's what I do, is I defined an integer for each to hold the column number for each different type of thing. And so if a different input file has the, say, the UPC, oops, that's down here in the detail, someplace, UPC, this is in column 4 in this file. It could be in column 8 in somebody else's file. But if I always refer to it by the name, it doesn't matter what column it's in. So that then made my whole process easier. And I developed some code that looks like this. And, you know, I would just test the record type to see if it was detail. And it doesn't matter. Of course, somebody has to have the detail word in their record. And then check different things. And I can do all of that symbolically. And so that was pretty slick. But then came the requirement to actually do it for a second person and a third person, and I really didn't want to have to keep coding all of this stuff and different procedures for each one, and also having to hard code the column numbers in my program bothered me. So I said, maybe what I need to do is to have some way of doing this outside. I think WinDev had something. And I got to find my compile statement. So I went into the help and looked. And found the compile statement. And so what I did was I put this code that you just saw into an external file called code. And then I'll give it a different type. And the type is the particular vendor that I'm looking for. And so I read that code, and that starts out, let me just show you here. Okay, pick your vendor. So when I pick a particular vendor, say United Foods, it has read this code here compiled it into a set fields procedure, and then I do a little error checking and execute it. And that code that you just saw is run for every single new invoice that comes in. I initialize the table, and it runs through this code. And it worked. One thing that I haven't been able to figure out, the help says that you can put comma here and parameters. And I don't know what to put in the code to get it to accept parameters. And technical support, I was hoping, would have that back for me now, but they don't. Didn't get back to me yet. So I don't know. I'll have to post that later. So that is basically how simple this is. I can have code for, whoops, where was it? This folks here, this is a different, no, this is what we were looking at. And I put it together here, I compile it, I make sure I get the errors out, I make sure that it works the way I want against the invoice. And then I just copy all of this code into a text editor and save it as a file externally, a text file externally. And then, as you saw, I load it in. Here's some different code for a different vendor. Really slick. I was amazed. And so I could provide some flexibility. The other interesting thing that I found.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead.
So instead of a text file, you could actually put it in a database, right? And just read in one that's pertinent to the vendor.
That's correct. I chose a text file because I wanted, in the event of an emergency, customer calls me and says, oh my gosh, you know, we just got a brand new format for vendor XYZ, and they they switch the columns around. And I can say, okay, edit this file and change that 8 to a 9 and this 9 to an 8, and now the two column locations are switched. And the code works exactly the same. So that's why I chose a text file, but yes, it could well have been a database, just one record in a database, or any place that you can store text.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Very good. I always thought of that as a cool way to do business rules too.
That's what Pete told me. Yeah, he said that's how he does business rules. And I have to find.
Yeah, that's the principle behind the business rule class. That you know, is another one of those things that I stole from Glenn and expanded into my own use.
Then here's the other thing I wanted to show you. This is where I load in the columns, the definitions. And what I should do is show you a columns file. There. This is how I define the columns for execution. What I showed here was just the fact that this is an integer, and here is how they're assigned. This is the external code that I was talking about, where I switched the 8 to a 9 and the 9 to an 8, and suddenly the column order is switched. And that in WinDev code is right. No, that's not it. Where'd it go? Initialization code. Here. So I load that file, the common path columns plus currently processing, and currently processing is the suffix that was set by that little drop down to pick the particular vendor, and execute code. So that's a string, and I just say execute code. And that's different from the other thing that I did where I said to set a procedure. And because I'm going to be calling this thing from the initialization of the table, I do the set fields for, actually, no, I think I could have just used the same thing. I didn't have to compile it into a procedure. Originally, I was thinking I was only going to do this once for the whole thing, but then I couldn't pass parameters in, and so I ended up having to do it for every single invoice that that came in. So these are the two different ways to use, excuse me, external information. Is this way to compile it into a procedure, or just to go ahead and execute the code that's in there. So this one line assigns values for this particular vendor to all of the different fields that are pertinent. And I may have more fields here than I actually use in that code, but that's okay. You just can't not have one here that you use in the code. Yeah. So that is...
And it's important to note that you have to declare them here. If you declared them in that code, their scope would only be inside that execute code.
Right. Yeah, and I have to use the header and the detail stuff is only used inside that code, but these guys are used. No, they're not. They're only used inside that code. The whole thing is wrapped up inside that code. This is where I build the table that's displayed, and then, oh no, the table is defined back in the main procedure, and I build the table here, and then when they commit and they say, okay, that looks like an invoice I want to process, then in the main code, I go through and I use the table to build the standard invoice file. So yeah, those things are actually only defined here, but I just didn't want to go through the work of redefining them every single time. It's probably enough to have a hit for every table. I did notice when I moved this out to a text file that the underlying base table, this little guy that you saw here, this guy here, that he would show up just a little bit longer as each table come in. And I can do, let's see, if I can just show you how the thing operates. 3 zip. All right, let's just pick one here. Oops, that's not the right one. Where'd it go? Here it is. And the way this, come on, system's not responding. There we go. The way this works is I just have them drag a zip file or an invoice file or something right under this button and drop it here, and then click here to process it, and there's nothing in that one, so skip. Ha ha ha, I broke something. It's detected the invoices, but it's, oh, I know what I did. I picked the wrong vendor. We'll try this again. Should have been this vendor. And that's something I'm still trying to work out, but okay. Oh, I just added that. That was not fair. All right. So here's the code for that. You know, it's mistakes that give us a chance to actually do something about that. Save that one. Oops. And
You did this so that you could demonstrate the fact that you're changing the code without recompiling the application.
exactly. Pete, you're right on the money. All right, so now I just execute again. And
It's a well laid out webinar, by the way.
Yeah. So anyway, now we're back in
the rest of us.
and we click it, and now we have some data here. And I can skip this invoice, and I can process this invoice. And you can see there's just a little bit of a lag as it flashes up, and that's actually when it's compiling that external code. And so as I just go through and do all of these, 8 files process. The record count I had to take out, so I must have spelled something wrong, or the great what do they call it? The thing where they stick the prefixes on the that messes me up sometimes, something fierce, when I'm sticking names in and I don't want the prefix there, and it puts one there and then I don't catch it. And that's one problem, is you don't get to know the errors until execution time. And if you're used to really having the compiler tell you instantly when you make a mistake, it's going to be a little different, because you don't find out that something is missing or wrong until you go to actually execute the code.
So when you test
yeah,
it,
we discussed this in the Skype group. Bob and I had some chats on this while he was working on it. That's one of the things I did, and I believe he wound up doing as well, is I develop in WinDev, get it working, then move it off into my external code.
Yep. And I thought I was safe, that I could just add the record count field and increment it. And clearly that did not work. The other thing is if we had time, I had I developed a little video last night of how to create this table using the data rather than typing in every bloody one of these fields. A lot of the tab delimited files have a header record that's tab delimited, and they have, nice field names and everything already in there. And so I created a little video that I can play and narrate that shows how to create that in case people don't work. The other cool thing that I realized, I was going along great. I was getting invoices and setting up formats and processing them, and then I got a fixed width file, no tabs. Oh my gosh, what do you do? And I thought, well, an integer is actually big enough to hold 2 smaller numbers. What if I could put the beginning column number for any particular field in the left half of the integer and the ending column number in the right half of the integer? I could use this whole same mechanism and handle fixed width files. And so I started doing that. I have not finished it. I made a couple of procedures that, to extract the field. So I pass in an integer and I pass in the string, and I split up the integer into those 2 high and low spots, and then I pull the string from beginning of the column to this column and return that instead of out of an array. Oh, that was the other thing I didn't show. In this code here, what I do is I take the line from the invoice, and I take all of the lines in the invoice and string it into an array. And then I take each line and break it down into fields. And then that is what I use the subscripts for to process it. And now what I'm saying is I could do this string to array to take the lines, but instead of string to array to process a line, I can just go ahead and, before I reference each one of these subscripts, I could just take and run it through that extract string. And so I would say if extract string record type is not equal to detail, then skip it and continue. So it has a lot of power and flexibility to be able to handle just about any invoice type or that kind of a file, either in tab delimited or fixed width format. It's not set up for comma delimited, because comma delimited can have commas inside of the fields and some other nasty things that I'm not set up to process. So if we want to, we can see, got a spreadsheet with a tab delimited file read into it, and we're interested in the detail field here. And so let's play this video and see what happens. So we select the header to the detail area and expand a blank line underneath it, and then number the columns, and then let Excel continue that column numbering. That was a mistake. I didn't get back and select column 1, but now fix that and just take those 1, 2, 3 as a sequence, and then drag that little marker out to the end, and Excel will number the fields for me. Then we take and we select both of the name and the number and copy them, and then paste them using paste special and do a transpose, which changes it from a horizontal to a vertical value. And now we have all of the column numbers, okay, numbered. And for the definition, what we wanted to say was is int for each one of those little suckers. So we need to put a column in front of B and type in is int, and then drag that down to fill all of the spaces. And I realized later what I should have done is said is int and then // and that would have commented the numbers, but I didn't, so I ended up actually inserting another column there. Come on, Bob, get it together. He'll find it. You can do it. There we go.
While Virtual Bob is doing that,
Yes.
why you could use an equal and have the default to the value of 1 also.
Yeah, but that's true. I could. It's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. So copying all of
That
these.
way you only need to override in your code. Just an option.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, some of the names, of course, had spaces in them, and we don't have the nifty IntelliSense to tell us that they need underscores. So, and now the columns are defined.
That is just slick.
So then we go back. And now
it's all about reducing the grunt work.
Yes. Now what we're going to actually do is assign the columns values based on, and Pete, like your original suggestion was to go ahead and use the default values would definitely. Now here, this is one of the powers of WinDev. I just got rid of all of those silly prefixes by using the Alt and the mouse click to delete that whole long vertical column. And we get that out of the way. And then select these and assign the numbers. And this is the code that I copied it into here, but it's actually what I copy that into an external text file, because this is what needs to be external to the application. And that, I don't know, unless anybody's got any questions, that wraps up what I've got to say.
Some great tips there, Bob.
Yeah, I like your video, man. That was great. Hey, how do you go in and do a auto indent to make all the equal signs like line up and stuff like that? Is there a tool in?
Not in WinDev. No, I'm sorry. I did that. I use a program called KEdit, and that is the PC version of Xedit, which was IBM's mainframe editor that I started using in 1980. And I've become rather attached to it, and so I just keep using it. I love it. And I've written all kinds of macros and things to do it, so it's very easy. I have a macro I call columnize, and it'll take any file, go through and look for the space break, and it'll take every word, figure out what the first word, what the maximum width is, and set it all up in columns. And so I just pasted that into an external file, and I said columnize it, and poof, it was there.
Yeah, just so you know, Pete, maybe this might trigger something in your head. in Clarion, you can do these add-ins, they call it. And so what Rick Martin did was he created whatever lines you highlighted. You hit Control Shift I, and instead of just doing a normal built-in indent, this one actually does the assignment formatting. So any line that is an assignment line with an equal sign, it goes there and lines them all up, you know, that kind of stuff with some other rules, and you can turn them on and off. So is there something in WinDev where you can add into the code editor to do that type of stuff?
You know, they have that user macro thing. I don't know how much that is exposed to the IDE, and I've never really played with it, so I wouldn't be able to answer you there.
Okay. It's something like I use all the time, just so things get lined. You know, you drop it in like he did, Control Shift I, and but that's only a situation that I'm talking about. But I'm just wondering if there's other editor enhancements you can create yourself.
Yeah, the alt deal that Bob showed solves 90% of my requirements.
Oh, columnar editing.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that is pretty powerful, because along with that, when you're in that columnar mode, like if you press Tab, it's going to tab out all the fields, and that's actually how I get things columnized. Is, you know, I'll highlight that row of code, put my mouse in the between, press Tab, and eventually they all line up. So
what is Carlos saying? Is he saying something to that effect? Let's see. I do something similar, but it is easy to just create a table with field names and then load the file with the first row contains the field name. The advantage is that they would because set of column numbers. Do you understand that?
I didn't look at the, let's see. First row contains the field name. The advantages they can be in any order. Yes, that's what I'm doing, is I'm matching by field name instead of by column number. But I could have used an associative array, I suppose, that as the subscript, and then I could just, I don't know if that would have helped much, really.
Yeah, I think I think what he's saying is your piece where you're attaching those numbers. It sounds like he has that in a user interface versus in an external file. But really, even doing that, the true power of what you're showing is that your conversion code is also in that external file.
Yes.
Yeah, your include file has the actual, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just numbering the columns.
Yeah, it's the whole action.
Yeah, and to be able to change that stuff and set it up for different vendors and to have it external was just an incredible breakthrough.
Yeah. Just one
So I can
thing.
write different.
Can we introduce some injection in here then?
That's what I was
Putting-
going to
Sure.
ask. SQLite injection is the problem I see here.
What did someone want us to check?
Yeah, my concern over here, as soon as you put the code you can compile in, you might get somebody malicious that bypass your security on your accounting system by compiling in something which can pick up information about people's security rights, or adding something which they shouldn't be adding into another table which is they should not have access to.
That's a good point. I'm not worried about that in this case because the real data is completely isolated from this. Actually it's a DOS program running under Linux is what I'm feeding this to. So there's no way that anybody can put code in here or anything that would compromise any information. So it's not a problem for me, but that's a good point about putting something in external. And I thought about...
Oh, so this the text file is not accessible to the end user. Is that what you're saying?
No, the text file is accessible to the end user. The problem is that no matter what you do to that text file, it goes into a DOS box running under Linux and is analyzed as just text. There is no possibility of putting any code or any instructions or anything else in there. You know, I mean,
all he's doing is reformatting the file before it goes to Linux.
Yep. So it's impossible for anyone to come up with any kind of a Trojan horse.
He's not talking to the external database at all inside this application.
Yeah, but the thing, I think the point that Wolfgang and I are making is, in your case, you're okay, but if you're trying to use this technique of including an external file to do stuff like in business rules or whatever, you could really cause yourself a headache.
Yeah, well, and that's true of anything. You know, you definitely got to consider the consequences. For instance, in my case, the business rules, the way they're implemented, they're actually able to be edited at runtime on every window, but of course security controls that to the super user, and 90% of my installations, the only true super user is me.
And I guess you can always do a washing of any, when you're reading the business rule, you could check for stuff that could be deadly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's definitely something you don't want to. You need to consider. You always have to look at how could this hurt me before you send it out into the world.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. If you know more or less the table structure on this particular application, I can go and put a HAD and make a payment to my own account, or we'll do a withdrawal from my account, kind of thing, whichever is going to hurt the business. And that's what concerns me when it's nice to have this execute capability, but we have to be very careful about the fact that you might get a clever guy out there who's going to figure this out, that it's the whole command, that the whole executes system, he's got at his disposal the whole W language, the whole WinDev language at his disposal. So if you don't filter out certain things, just like SQL injection, you're going to have a problem.
Yep.
So I would suggest like HAdd and all the other fancy stuff which you can do, filter it out and make a list of, say, allowable keywords or non-allowable keywords or whatever the case is. You have to somehow stop that. Because even if you use groupware or some security system, I don't know how you're going to bypass it, because if you're not calling a business rule and you bypass them doing the HAdd, your business rules and or your security is not going to help. You're talking directly to the table.
Well, again, in my case, you can't edit the business rule. You have to go through security to edit that business rule in the first place. So,
yes,
you know.
But if I'm using HAdd, I bypass your business rule altogether, isn't it?
How are you getting that HAdd in there? The only way to get that HAdd in there is to edit the business rule. The only way to edit the business rule is to have permission to edit the business rule. Mine aren't stored in an external file. They're stored in a database.
Okay, so you got, okay. Yours is a bit more protected in the sense that you
Right.
control the business rules. Okay, but in this
Right.
case, yeah, it's a text file. That's what I'm talking
Right.
about.
You know, and Bob's point in his case is this program actually is not talking to an external database. HAD's not going to do you anything because there is no database to HAD to.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, your point is valid for sure.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those things as a developer we definitely have to be aware of and
Okay.
cautious of.
Yeah. So if it's not adding to your main database, then it's fine. Then you're kind of safe. But, that's something you have to be aware of. Okay. Nice.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments or feedback or good ideas?
No, and if anyone is viewing this offline later and has a question, you know, they can always post it on the Skype group, and I will.
No, they should have got their butt up and watched the webinar.
Yeah, I know that, but.
But if you have a suggestion and you see something and you want to let Bob or Pete know what something you've seen, yeah, give them feedback.
Yep, absolutely.
So Wolfgang, how's your schedule looking? When are we going to get you freed up where you can start doing webinars again?
It'll be more like January side. But
He's in the busy season of his industry right now.
Yeah.
Security industry.
This is a silly season time for us, so we really busy.
Alrighty, so everybody go to work. Get back to work. Thanks again. Thanks again, Pete and Bob, for sharing. It's great.
You're welcome, and thank you, Arnold, for being the sharing controller.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording because I don't think we have any other questions or comments.
Cheers, guys.
All right.